This is 9 ways to scale your business without being pod famous. I'm Toby Goodman from narrowpodcasting.com. And this is a version of a talk I recently gave at the Podcast Show London, the world's biggest podcasting conference. And it's the third time I spoke there. This was the highlights of the chat I had with my people. So 9 ways to scale your business without being pod famous. Number 1 is guest selection. Who are the 3 types of guests we should invite, and why might less famous people be more valuable than big names? Let's go for the 3 first. So number 1, clients. Clients are people you should invite on your podcast, and that also includes previous clients as well, past clients, because this is great for a retention strategy. The second type of guest are powerful referrers. These are people who may never hire you, but they're influential. They're people who hang around people in your target market and refer you. Those people trust these powerful referrers, and that means they're worth talking to and having relationships with. The third kind are JV partners, joint venture partners, people who serve the same target market and deliver a slightly different result. That means you can work together. And of course, these guests could be all of these together or combinations of clients, referrers, and partners. So that's really important. Stay really focused on who you're going to invite on your podcast as a guest. Plus, let's talk about big names. Now, less famous people are more inclined to talk about being on a podcast, to share they've been on a podcast if they don't normally get invited on one. A client recently asked me if they should have a super famous celebrity they knew on their podcast, and I just couldn't see a reason other than they were friends and they'd be happy to do it. They weren't going to necessarily share it. They weren't necessarily going to produce anything that was worth listening to. The celebrity may have come on and said the same sorts of things that she always says on podcasts and tell stories, and that's great, but wasn't really anything to do with the business that this person I was working with had. So I didn't really get it. And I felt that actually, if she was going to have a celebrity on her podcast, she needed to be quite a few episodes in. So there was more experience with interviewing, and we could work out and plan exactly what kinds of questions my client could ask this celebrity so that they would answer and they would think, this is different, and it would become a shareable episode. Let's move on. Number 2 is case study. Now, how do case study episodes work, and why are they so powerful? It's simple. They are perfect show, don't tell vehicles. When you tell the story of a client's success, you create a shareable asset. That client will share your podcast, and you're demonstrating your expertise in real life. Case study episodes are awesome. Right. Point number 3 is connection. So how can podcasting help you connect with people you might not otherwise reach? This for me is about positioning, and it's such an important part of having a podcast that grows the business you have and not having a podcast that becomes its own business. So everyone's favorite sound is the sound of their own voice. And when I first ran my podcast in 2011, I was using it to grow a high-end party band. And we were trying to get in with event planners who were going to book us as musicians to play around the world and all of that stuff. They didn't want to talk to us at all until we invited them on a podcast to talk about themselves. So the positioning of our podcast was for professional event planners to talk about themselves. And we would seed that question when it comes to working with musicians. What are your main challenges? And they'd always give us some version of they're late, they play too loud, and some of them smell, which would give us the opportunity to say, that's why we always hire musicians that show up on time, that play appropriate to the room that they're in volume-wise, and of course have very high levels of personal hygiene. Okay, number 4 is harvest. Now, I'm going to talk about a pod-lationship cycle. So what is that, and why is it more valuable than chasing followers and listeners? Pod-lationship cycle is a template system. It's in my book, Narrow Podcasting, and it's what I design with my clients, and it's about follow-up. It's about everything you do after the podcast episode itself goes live, and it's your job to harvest the relationship, to continue to feed the relationship. If you have an asset, which is your podcast episode with that person, you have an excuse to stay in touch, get back in touch, follow up on things they said. If they talked about their plans in 3 months' time, follow up in 3 months' time, or their long-term plans. So keep in touch, keep top of mind, and find things to connect with those high-value guests. Harvest those relationships. Okay, number 5 is talk about what you do. So how do you use your podcast to clearly position what you do without massive cringe? So sometimes, yes, you do have to blow your own trumpet. Louis Armstrong was a great player for lots of reasons, not least because he was a great leader. He was a great listener too. And if you listen, you'll know what to say because it's your show. Lead, listen, respond. And you can mix being an expert with speaking and listening to experts and relate those points back to something relevant to your work. You're going to respond in a moment, just like a great jazz musician does. That reminds me of the time this happened with one of my clients. So go back to those powerful referrers and joint venture partners and think about what kinds of things they would say and how you can bring yourself appropriately into the conversation. I'm going to revisit listening again in point 8 because it's just so important. But we're going to move on to number 6 for now. So number 6 is Prescription Pod. What is Prescription Pod? How does it make building relationships easier? So Prescription Pod is an amazing tactic. Some of my first clients were high-level executive coaches. They were corporate refugees. They'd been in massive corporations, having all this stuff, all this marketing money that they had access to that made magic happen, that made billboards happen in Times Square. They left the corporate world and suddenly they're on their own doing their own thing. And a Prescription Pod is a great tactic that helped them set the stage for conversations with prospects and retain clients without having to do these long calls, and help them build relationship capital by having them look at people in their network that they'd already recorded episodes to and send those episodes ahead of time. So for example, this podcast episode that I did with Kim Medina is called Does Podcasting Dilute Authority? That's a question she asked me in that podcast. If anyone asks me that, who is on my radar, who might be a prospect, I can say, before we book a call, have a listen to this. My answer is in here. It's a podcast that I recorded with my friend Kim, and we talked to that point. So I'm giving them, like a doctor would, it's not going to solve all their problems. It's not going to solve everything that I can help them with, but it's going to give them a little bit of medicine that shows them I know what I'm talking about. I know what I'm doing. Let's move on. Number 7 is repurpose. Now, how can one episode do multiple jobs across your content strategy? I think at this point, it's better if I show you rather than tell you. So in this slide, you can see my spider diagram, which was attached to an email you can see on the 10th of November, 2015. And this was years ago, our initial play on, oh, this podcasting thing might be good for business, right? In the middle is the podcasting, is the content, is what you're recording. And then these different legs of the spider go out. Social media, blogging, lead magnets, all that kind of stuff is there. Can you even believe that transcripts were something that people had to do without using AI or technology? So much of this now is just part of the conversation because AI is so brilliant at so many things. Where I spend most of my time with my clients is in the training arm, right? Creating other additional assets that are internal to a business that come from podcast and recorded audio content and sit in their content bank to help them run their business, not just out there marketing. Okay, number 8 is classy mentions. How do you bring up offers or client results without sounding salesy? So we're back to listening. Be an active listener. As you listen, relate back to people and things that you've done. If you can help, listen for opportunities. Be aware of the environment you're in. If someone talks about retaining employees to me, I will talk to them about how I helped a multi-state healthcare organization reconnect to a team across 12 locations, hundreds of employees using a podcast. And speaking of healthcare, this is another good example for number 9. Now, number 9 is need to know. So what is the benefit of creating a private episode for clients or a community? So healthcare is a great example. I was told by the pilot of this plane I did not need to know who the client was. And not everyone needs to know who you're talking to. And sometimes it's actually in your interest. And healthcare is a good example because there's a lot of legislation in the UK and in parts of the US where it's not actually legal to talk about certain medicines, certain things that are happening that are still in process that haven't been approved. So it's right that you would keep those behind closed doors. Think about how you serve your clients, how you retain them. Sometimes it might just be easier for you to create stuff that's behind a wall, if you like, of either team members or clients. And you can produce that stuff. You may choose to drip it out into the public domain later. You may choose to have a separate public podcast, but actually, this is still fantastic content for you to keep people abreast of what's going on and all of that good stuff. So that was 9. Now, because I know number 5 and number 8 were very similar, I'm going to give you another one. Number 10 is flip the script. So why should you let your clients ask you the questions and what happens when you do? So I love this format. Q&A style podcasts where they come on and ask you are great ways of stopping that free strategy session. And if someone passes the smell test but still ends up not being a good fit for you for whatever reason, at least it means you can create content from a podcast and it can serve you in perpetuity. So for example, does podcasting dilute authority? At that time, I didn't know if Kim was going to start a podcast or not, but that is a solid podcast episode that I will use for a long time to help people understand how to position themselves if they happen to be an executive coach like him. Okay, so let's have a super quick recap. So number 1 is guest selection. That's about careful curation. Number 2, case study. That's about show, don't tell. Number 3, connection. That's about positioning. Super important. Harvesting is about follow up and staying in touch with your people. 5, talk about what you do is about reading the room and making appropriate inroads when you're talking about your stuff without being cringe. Listen, always listen. Number 7, repurposing. That's really about doing less work by designing a system that works for your needs and being where you need to be, not being where you don't have to be everywhere just because you can. It's easy though. Number 8, it's easy to do that now because of all the platforms, but just focus on repurposing to the channels externally and internally you need to. Number 8, classy mentions. I went back to listening and I won't apologize for it. Active listening, being relevant, not competitive speaking. Number 9, need to know. That was about the power of private podcasts. And if that's relevant to you, then check that stuff out. The technology exists. Happy to help you if you want to move into that domain as well. Number 10, flip the script, is about having your guests interview you to avoid that dreaded free strategy session and create value for your business immediately in a win-win way. There are 7 ways you can get my support, and here they are. Number 1, you can listen to Not Another Business Podcast with Toby Goodman. That's my current podcast. Number 2, you can watch How to Get Clients with Your Podcast, which is a keynote I've given all around the world with a plastic duck that teaches you, surprise, surprise, how to get clients with your podcast. Number 3, I'm going to tell you about in a minute. Number 4, Narrow Podcasting is a best-selling book. It's the original book about how to use podcasting to grow a business, not to use podcasting as a new business and make it the fame thing, right? So that's my book. It's about £10, $10 on Amazon, I believe. Number 5, you can work with me and my team to create those assets and have them produced, i.e., I can get your podcast made for you if that's what you want. Number 6, moving faster with planning and positioning. So working with me one-to-one as an advisory client, I can help you position and plan or improve your podcast so it actually works for your business. Number 7 is need to know. So you don't need to know what that is at the moment, but you may find out if we end up talking to each other or working together in any way. So you can connect with me on LinkedIn, of course. So what was number 3? Number 3 was my profitable pod method skill sessions in 3 phases. They help you plan, they help you deliver, and then they help you with the follow-up in phase 3, all of that harvesting stuff I talked about. That's all in there. And because you've just sat through this presentation and invested your time in me, I'd be happy to give you any one of those skills sessions. So if you pause the screen, scan the QR code, you'll see all the list. And if you hit me up on LinkedIn and say, hey, Toby, I just watched your thing, I would be totally happy to send you one of those skills sessions, no strings, and make sure that you have the next move so that you've got something that will help move you and your business and your podcast forward. So head over to that QR code. You'll find me on LinkedIn and ping me a message. Or, of course, head over to narrowpodcasting.com and get in touch there using the contact button. So that was 9 ways to scale your business without being pod famous. I'm Toby. That was all about podcasting for your business growth. You can find out more over at narrowpodcasting.com.